the very first podcast for the Crary Art Gallery, and today we have with us Zack and Rena Rabold, and we have Zack, who's going to be exhibiting at the Crary. Welcome, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
So, yeah, I've looked at your work, and it's amazing stuff, and it's very exciting that we're going to have it at the Crary. And I was curious, how did you learn to become such a great photographer? What's that process you went through to become where you're at right now with your work?
It's probably a mixture of superiority complex.
No doubt.
Yeah. And I have a background in other forms of art. I started as a journalist and then moved into photojournalism, which branched off into photography.
Oh, okay.
And my father has been an amateur photographer since he was probably in his teens. It's always been around me as I've been growing up. And
so you always had the equipment available and the expertise as well.
Yeah, and I'm a strong believer in that idea of the 10,000 hours. You just keep working at it like the Beatles in Hamburg. And after 10,000 hours of constant work on something, you tend to master it.
True. So as you develop your work, do you find yourself influenced by other photographers?
Somewhat. I have an odd style that I developed through mostly photojournalism, which it's an odd practice to put into nature photography or landscape photography. And in that regard, I haven't really picked up anything from anybody. Most people cite Ansel Adams or someone like that as an inspiration, but while his photos are great, he was more a master of the dark room, and he exploited his talents there to improve more mediocre images that he may have taken into masterpieces.
Right. So I guess that's a question I have is, do you do any post photography work to your photos to enhance them?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Right.
I'm probably better at that than I am at taking pictures.
That is not necessarily true.
Well, I'm better at exploiting them with it, just like Ansel Adams.
So there is a lot of that work, and I noticed when I saw your photos too, lighting is obviously very key in everything you do. And all I can imagine is you pick a spot. It's like, okay, the lighting isn't right. You're sitting there for hours, waiting for the lighting just to hit the right moment, and then you're taking your photos at that point.
It's the exact opposite, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. From my journalistic background, I tend to shoot about 12 to 18 hours a day, depending on where I am or who I'm with. And I, again, with my OCD, I tend to plan out trips like by the minute. And I prepare where the best situation would be by looking at the lighting it would be during a certain time of day, depending on where the thing I want to shoot is, and how the sun's going to be at that period of day.
Right.
So it's very strategic for me, and oftentimes I have to backtrack across areas. But for the most part, I do most of my national parks photography as kind of a one-day project, which is kind of, well, it's very strange, and most people don't believe it after they see the photos. Because what would take someone like Ansel Adams weeks to shoot, I tend to shoot in about 6 hours.
So literally, what you're saying is, if you know you're going to a particular park, you lay out your plan, understanding where the light's coming from, and you get down to that detail in terms of planning out your day?
Months in advance.
Seriously? Wow.
Yeah.
And you know exactly where you're going to be taking a photo even before you see it?
Oh, yeah. I research it on Google Earth and other people's photography. That's not to say I steal other people's ideas.
Right.
But I look at the situation and see what would be the best lighting. And then once I get there, I elaborate on the research I've done.
Now, you mentioned national parks as being something you're taking photos of most often. I mean, how many parks have you done?
I've shot 30 of the 58 national parks, the premier ones. There's over 300 and I think 80 something now, 87. It might be more, like 95 or something.
Uh-huh.
In the National Park Service, there's that many sites. But of the actual national parks, like the premier parks, there's 58, and I've shot 30 since the summer of 2007.
Wow. So what's the end game with this project? What are you planning on doing once you've been to all of them?
Well, I've been working on this really ridiculous and huge project for about a year now.
Uh-huh.
I've been establishing a list of places that should be protected as national parks or national monuments or any other designation.
Uh-huh.
And after I finish the national parks, I definitely want to get outside of the United States for a while and shoot some in Africa or Europe.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But long term, it would be coming back and shooting these places that I've categorized as places that should be protected in the National Park Service, but aren't. And I have a bit of a, a compulsion to be, say, like a Ansel Adams or a George Massa, who were instrumental in helping to create the national parks by creating awareness.
Sure.
And I would love to be a part of that in using all the research I've done and singling out these areas that are unprotected but just as majestic as Yosemite or Yellowstone.
Sure.
Try to get them appreciated too.
Rena, so you accompany Zack on any of these junkets?
Yeah, I went on a couple trips with him down south.
The warm weather
Springs
areas.
National Park.
Yeah, in summer. That was a wonderful idea.
That was a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful, but it's very, very hot. And out west to Saguaro National Park and Joshua Tree National Park. So, and those were very good trips. But Zack's interesting to work with. But just like you said, it's very fast-paced, you know. So I always do all the driving.
Oh, okay.
We spend a fair bit amount of time in the car. So
yeah, you have to be able to put up with my style, definitely, to go on a trip with me.
Oh, your style. You're not talking about photography.
My style at travel.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's very fast-paced. But actually, that's what I enjoy most about it, because, you know, we went away for 5 days at a time, but we saw so much. So they're really well planned out, really well thought out trips.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, it makes it a really good experience. It's interesting because whenever you get a map for the trip that you're going to take with Zack, there are 3 different categories. There's the green category, and that's where you're going for sure. There's the yellow categories, and those are things that are cool if you have time to go to. That, you know, we can decide if you want to do that. And then there's red, and there's things that are there, but they might not be interesting, but they're there because he researched them and he knows they're there.
Uh-huh.
So it's definitely very thought out, very intentional.
Most of that last category would be like museums in case the weather turned bad or something like that. There'd still be a source of photography instead of just sitting in a hotel room all day.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So when you're actually taking the photos, do you find yourself becoming a different person as part of that process?
I'm kind of that person to begin with, so not really for me.
Uh-huh.
I tend to be kind of a Henry David Thoreau style recluse who can deal without people as long as I have like a vast landscape in front of me.
Uh-huh.
So I've more changed my life to be more like I would think you're suggesting, like I become a different person into my own separate world.
Right.
While I'm taking the picture.
Mm-hmm.
That's more taking over my life than anything else.
So, Rena, what's your observation in terms of watching Zack work? I mean, how do you see that influencing how you take photos?
Well, just his fast pace and just even the way that he looks at things and the angles that he'll take photos. Just kind of watching all of that and observing and trying new things myself have been a really big influence, especially the pace, which was really good. You know, I was in Ireland for a year, so I did get to travel, it was for short periods of time. So it was good to kind of have learned how to photograph things quickly, but photograph them well at the same time. So, and kind of differently too.
I'd like to thank Zack and Rena for taking the time out today to talk about your work, Zack, and we look forward to seeing your exhibit.
Thank you.
Thank you.